The mining colony on Kepler 442b had been quiet for 3 months. Too quiet. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the reinforced window of the research station, watching the crimson sunset paint the alien landscape in shades of blood. At 19, she was the youngest xenobiologist ever assigned to an outer rim colony, but her enthusiasm had long since turned to unease. The Zephyrians had arrived without warning 6 weeks ago. Their sleek black ships descended like ravens, landing in perfect formation around the human settlement. The aliens themselves were tall, elegant beings with translucent skin that showed the flow of blue-green fluid beneath. They spoke in melodic tones that their universal translators converted into polite diplomatic language. They claimed to be explorers, interested in peaceful cultural exchange. The colony administrator, Dr. Marcus Webb, had welcomed them with open arms. Humanity had encountered dozens of alien species since venturing into deep space, and most proved benign or simply indifferent to human presence. But Sarah noticed things others missed. The way Zephyrian eyes tracked human children during their visits to the settlement, how their diplomatic smiles never quite reached those dark, calculating eyes, the strange energy readings her instruments picked up whenever they gathered in groups. Her concerns fell on deaf ears. Dr. Webb dismissed her observations as xenophobic paranoia. The other colonists were too excited about potential technological exchanges to pay attention to a young scientist's worries. Even her mentor, Dr. Rodriguez, suggested she was letting stress affect her judgment. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered the underground caverns. While collecting geological samples 3 kilometers from the settlement, her scanner detected massive hollow spaces beneath the surface. The caves stretched for kilometers in every direction, far too extensive to be natural formations. When she rappelled down through a narrow opening, her headlamp revealed something that made her blood freeze. The caverns were filled with biomechanical structures that pulsed with organic life. Walls covered in what looked like nervous system tissue stretched into the darkness. Strange pods lined the corridors, each one roughly human-sized. Some were empty, their transparent surfaces gleaming wetly. Others contained shadowy forms floating in murky fluid. Sarah's scanner went wild as she moved deeper into the complex. The structures weren't just alive, they were sophisticated technology, unlike anything in human or known alien databases. This wasn't a natural cave system. It was a facility, carefully hidden beneath the planet's surface. A soft sound made her spin around. One of the pods was opening with a wet, sucking noise. The creature that emerged was unlike anything she had ever seen, even in her extensive xenobiology training. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. Its body was reptilian but walked upright like a humanoid, massive wings folded against its back, and its elongated head bore rows of crystalline teeth. But it was the eyes that held her attention. Ancient, intelligent, and filled with a sadness so profound it made her chest ache. When the creature looked at her, she felt no fear despite its fearsome appearance. Instead, she sensed recognition, as if it had been waiting specifically for her arrival. The creature spoke not with words but directly into her mind. Images flooded her consciousness. This planet's original inhabitants, a proud draconic species that had achieved spaceflight millennia before humans discovered fire. The Zephyrians arriving as conquerors, not explorers. The systematic harvest of the dragon people. Their consciousness preserved in the biopods while their life force powered Zephyrian technology. The mental communication revealed the creature's name. Thyros, once a guardian of his people's sacred knowledge. He had been imprisoned in the biopod for over a century, his mind trapped while his body sustained Zephyrian experiments. The facility beneath the human colony was just one of hundreds scattered across their former homeworld. Sarah staggered under the weight of the revelation. The Zephyrians weren't interested in cultural exchange with humanity. They were setting up another harvest operation. The human colony was being studied, catalogued, prepared for the same fate that had befallen Thyros's people. Thyros showed her more images. Human children being quietly scanned during Zephyrian visits. Their neural patterns recorded for compatibility testing. The elegant aliens discussing which humans would provide the best energy sources for their biomechanical systems. Plans for expanding the underground facility to accommodate a new species. The creature's massive clawed hand gestured toward empty pods lining the far wall. They were being prepared for human occupants. Within weeks, the Zephyrians would complete their preparations and begin the harvest. The colonists would simply disappear, their consciousness preserved to power alien technology, while their bodies withered away in the dark. Sarah's training kicked in as the horror of the situation settled over her. She activated her emergency recorder, documenting everything her scanner detected in the cavern. Thyros watched her work with something that might have been approval in his ancient eyes. When she finished, he touched her mind again with a single clear message. The Zephyrians had one weakness, but using it would require trust between their species. As she climbed back toward the surface, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. She had evidence of the Zephyrian deception, but would anyone believe her? Dr. Webb was convinced the aliens were humanity's friends. The colony security force was minimal, designed more for wildlife protection than military defense. Most colonists were scientists and miners, not soldiers, but she had to try. Thyros's people had been caught off guard by the Zephyrian invasion. Humanity still had a chance to avoid the same fate if she could convince them to listen. The creature's parting message echoed in her thoughts as she reached the surface. The dragons had not given up hope. Even after a century of imprisonment, the real battle for Kepler 442b was about to begin, and Sarah Chen found herself at the center of a conflict that would determine whether humanity learned from another species' tragedy or repeated it. The Zephyrians had made one crucial mistake. They had awakened something ancient and powerful that still remembered how to fight. Sarah's hands shook as she uploaded the cavern data to her personal terminal. The research station felt different now. Every shadow potentially hiding a Zephyrian spy. Every friendly alien gesture carrying sinister undertones. She had to act fast but carefully. One wrong move would alert the Zephyrians that their deception had been discovered. Dr. Webb's office occupied the top floor of the administration building, its panoramic windows offering a clear view of the Zephyrian ships arranged like silent sentinels around the colony. Sarah clutched her datapad as she requested an urgent meeting, knowing that what she was about to reveal would either save the colony or mark her as a target for elimination. The administrator listened to her report with growing skepticism. When she showed him the scan data from the underground facility, his face darkened with annoyance rather than alarm. The images of biomechanical pods and organic technology drew dismissive comments about equipment malfunctions and stressed imaginations. Dr. Chen, I understand the isolation out here can affect people differently, Webb said, his tone patronizing, but accusing our guests of running some kind of alien concentration camp based on questionable scanner readings is completely unacceptable. The Zephyrians have been nothing but helpful since their arrival. Sarah pressed forward, showing him Thyros's message about the planned harvest. Webb's expression shifted from annoyance to genuine concern, but not for the reasons she hoped. He was worried about her mental state, not the alien threat. When she mentioned the telepathic communication with the dragon creature, he quietly activated his desk communicator. "Security to my office, please," he said softly. "We have a situation." The betrayal hit Sarah like a physical blow. She realized with growing horror that Webb wasn't just dismissing her evidence. He was treating her like a dangerous person having a psychological breakdown. When colony security arrived, they would likely sedate her and place her under medical observation. The Zephyrians would learn about her discovery, and any chance of warning the colonists would disappear. Sarah backed toward the office door as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Webb was speaking into his communicator again, requesting medical personnel to accompany security. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they arrived to detain her. "Dr. Webb, please just look at the bio readings from those pods," she pleaded. "The organic technology matches nothing in our databases. Those structures have been there for decades, maybe centuries. The Zephyrians didn't build them recently. They've been using this planet as a harvesting ground for generations." But Webb had already made up his mind. The security team entered his office just as Sarah slipped out through the rear exit that led to the building's service corridors. She could hear them discussing search protocols as she descended the maintenance stairwell, her heart pounding against her ribs. The colony's communication array was located in a separate building near the landing pad. If she could access the long-range transmitters, she might be able to send a warning to Earth or nearby human settlements. But crossing the open ground between buildings would expose her to both security cameras and potential Zephyrian observation. Sarah, made her way through the underground utility tunnels that connected the colony's major structures. The cramped passages had been designed for maintenance access, not human travel, but they offered concealment from the search teams now combing the settlement. Her tablet provided basic lighting as she navigated the maze of pipes and conduits. The communication building's utility access was protected by a simple electronic lock that Sarah bypassed using her research credentials. She emerged into the transmitter room just as emergency lights began flashing throughout the complex. Colony-wide security alerts echoed over the intercom system, announcing that Dr. Chen was experiencing a medical emergency and should be approached with caution. Sarah's fingers flew over the communication console as she initiated contact protocols with the nearest human military installation. The transmission would take hours to reach its destination, but it might be their only chance to summon help before the Zephyrians completed their harvest preparations. A soft sound behind her made her freeze. She turned slowly to find a Zephyrian standing in the doorway, its translucent features arranged in what might have been a sympathetic expression. The alien's voice carried the musical quality she had grown accustomed to, but now it sounded sinister rather than beautiful. "Dr. Chen, your administrator is quite concerned about your well-being," the Zephyrian said, stepping into the room. "Perhaps you should return with me for medical evaluation. These stress-induced hallucinations can be quite serious if left untreated." The alien's casual dismissal of her discoveries confirmed everything Thyros had shown her. They knew she had found the underground facility, and they were moving to contain the situation. Sarah's hand hovered over the emergency broadcast button that would transmit her warning to every human ship and station within range. "I know what you are," she said quietly. "I know what you did to the dragons, and I know what you're planning to do to us." The Zephyrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in its posture. The pretense of concern evaporated, replaced by cold calculation. When it spoke again, the universal translator seemed to struggle with undertones in its voice that hadn't been there before. "Your species shows remarkable intuition for such a young civilization," it said. "Unfortunately, intuition without power is simply tragedy waiting to happen. Your dragons thought they could resist us as well. Their preserved consciousness in our biopod serves as a reminder of how that resistance ended." Sarah slammed her palm down on the emergency broadcast button just as the Zephyrian lunged toward her. The transmission began uploading her recorded evidence to every receiver in the system, including the colony's internal communications. Even if the alien stopped her now, the warning would reach other humans. The Zephyrian's attack never connected. A massive clawed hand burst through the communication room's reinforced window, seizing the alien around its slender torso. Thyros had somehow escaped from the underground facility and tracked Sarah to the communication building. His ancient eyes burned with fury as he lifted the struggling Zephyrian off the ground. "The harvest ends here." Thyros spoke directly into both their minds, his mental voice carrying the weight of a century's accumulated rage. "My people's suffering will be avenged." The Zephyrian writhed in the dragon's grip, its melodic voice rising to a piercing shriek that shattered the room's electronic equipment. But Thyros held firm, his massive frame filling the broken window as he prepared to settle a debt that had been building for over 100 years. Sarah watched in fascination and terror as the confrontation unfolded. The ancient dragon had broken free of his imprisonment, but how many others remained trapped in the biopods beneath the colony? And what would happen when the other Zephyrians discovered that their carefully orchestrated deception was crumbling around them? The real war for Kepler 442b had begun, and Sarah found herself caught between two alien civilizations with centuries of hatred driving them toward a final, devastating confrontation. The Zephyrian's death scream echoed across the colony like a crystal bell shattering. Thyros released the lifeless body, which crumpled to the communication room floor in an undignified heap. The dragon's massive head turned toward Sarah, his ancient eyes reflecting emotions too complex for human understanding. "They will know now," he said into her mind. "The deception is over. Your people must be warned immediately." Sarah's emergency broadcast was still uploading when alarms began wailing throughout the colony. Through the broken window, she could see Zephyrian ships powering up their engines, their sleek hulls beginning to glow with the same eerie energy she had detected in the underground facility. Whatever patience the aliens had shown during their masquerade was gone. Thyros squeezed his massive frame through the window opening, his scales scraping against the reinforced glass. Standing at full height inside the communication room, he towered over Sarah like a living monument to prehistoric power. But when he extended one clawed hand toward her, the gesture was surprisingly gentle. "You must come with me," he said. "The facility beneath your settlement contains more than just preservation pods. There are weapons there, technology my people developed during the last war. If we can reach them before the Zephyrians lock down the complex, we might have a chance." Sarah hesitated. Everything in her scientific training rebelled against trusting a creature she had met only hours earlier. But the evidence of Zephyrian deception was mounting by the minute. Through the window, she could see human colonists emerging from buildings with confused expressions, looking around at the suddenly active alien ships with growing alarm. "What about the other dragons?" she asked. "How many of your people are still alive down there?" Thyros's mental voice carried a note of ancient grief. 17 remain in viable preservation pods. The others. He paused, and Sarah felt an echo of loss that threatened to overwhelm her. The others were consumed completely, their life force drained to power Zephyrian experiments. "We 17 are all that survive of a species that once numbered in the millions." The weight of that revelation staggered Sarah. An entire civilization reduced to 17 survivors, trapped for over a century while their captors used their homeworld as a hunting ground for new victims. The same fate awaited humanity if the Zephyrians succeeded in their harvest. A new sound cut through the colony's alarms, the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging. Sarah looked through the window to see Zephyrian soldiers emerging from their ships, carrying devices that hummed with lethal purpose. The aliens had abandoned all pretense of peaceful exploration. "The colonists," Sarah said urgently. "We have to warn them, get them to shelter." "Your people are already beyond our help," Thyros replied with brutal honesty. "The Zephyrians will use stunning weapons first, designed to incapacitate without permanent damage. They need your people alive for the harvest. Our only chance is to reach the weapon systems before they can be activated." Sarah made her decision. She grabbed her data tablet and emergency supplies from the communication room's storage locker, then followed Thyros through the broken window. The dragon moved with surprising grace for such a massive creature, his powerful legs carrying him across the colony's open spaces in long, fluid strides. Behind them, energy weapons began discharging with sharp, crackling sounds. Sarah glanced back to see colonists collapsing as blue-white beams struck them down. Dr. Webb stumbled from the administration building, shouting orders that no one could hear over the chaos. A Zephyrian beam caught him mid-stride, and he crumpled to the ground like a puppet with severed strings. The entrance to the underground facility lay hidden beneath an unremarkable maintenance shed near the colony's water processing plant. Thyros tore the building's door off its hinges with casual strength, revealing a concealed shaft that descended into darkness. Emergency lighting activated as they entered, illuminating a smooth-walled tunnel that had clearly been constructed with non-human technology. "The Zephyrians will seal this entrance once they realize we've reached the facility," Thyros explained as they descended. "But there are other ways in and out. My people were not foolish enough to build only one exit from their strongholds." The tunnel opened into the vast chamber Sarah had discovered earlier, but now she could see it properly. The biomechanical structures weren't random growths. They formed a sophisticated network that pulsed with regulated energy flows. Thyros led her past rows of preservation pods toward a section of the complex she hadn't explored during her first visit. "The weapons are kept in the deepest chambers," he said, navigating the organic corridors with the confidence of someone returning to a familiar home. "My people believed in peace, but we were not naive about the universe's dangers. When the Zephyrians first attacked our outer colonies, we prepared defenses. They passed through chambers filled with technology that Sarah couldn't begin to understand. Crystalline formations that sang with harmonic frequencies when Thyros approached, walls covered in symbols that shifted and changed as she watched, possibly responding to the dragon's presence. Everything in the facility felt alive, as if the distinction between biology and technology had been completely abandoned. The weapon chamber was sealed behind a massive door, covered in dragon script. Thyros placed his clawed hands against specific symbols, and the barrier dissolved like mist. Inside, Sarah found herself in a room that defied easy description. Weapons hung from organic racks that grew from the walls, each one unique and clearly crafted for dragon physiology. But it was the central chamber that caught her attention. A massive crystalline structure rose from the floor, its faceted surface pulsing with the same energy she had detected in the Zephyrian ships. Thyros approached it with something approaching reverence, his mental voice filled with ancient memories. "The heart of storms," he said. "My people's greatest creation and their most terrible weapon. It was built to channel the planet's magnetic field into a directed energy blast capable of disabling entire fleets. We hoped never to use it." Sarah studied the crystal formation with her scanner, trying to understand its construction principles. The readings defied conventional physics, suggesting technology that manipulated fundamental forces in ways human science had never imagined. The weapon wasn't just powerful, it was a masterpiece of engineering that made humanity's best technology look primitive by comparison. "Can you operate it?" she asked. Thyros's massive head nodded slowly. "The heart responds only to dragon bioelectric patterns, but activating it will require awakening my people from their preservation pods. The weapon needs multiple consciousness streams to function properly." Sarah understood the implication. Waking the other dragons would alert the Zephyrians to their location, triggering a direct confrontation in the facility's confined spaces. But leaving them unconscious meant the Heart of Storms would remain inactive, while the aliens completed their harvest of human colonists. Above them, the sounds of battle were growing closer. The Zephyrians had discovered the hidden entrance and were moving into the facility. Soon they would reach the weapon chamber and destroy humanity's only hope of resistance. Thyros looked at Sarah with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. In his ancient gaze, she saw a question that would determine the fate of both their species. Was she willing to trust him with the power to either save or destroy everything she held dear? Sarah's decision came with startling clarity. She placed her hand on Thyros's massive forearm, feeling the surprising warmth of his scales beneath her palm. "Wake them," she said. "Wake your people. We'll face whatever comes together." Thyros's mental voice carried a note of profound gratitude. "Your species possesses courage that echoes across the stars, young Sarah. Perhaps that is why the Zephyrians fear you, enough to harvest rather than simply destroy." The dragon moved to a control interface that grew from the chamber's living walls like a technological coral reef. His clawed fingers danced across surfaces that responded to his touch with cascading lights. Throughout the facility, Sarah could feel something awakening, a presence vast and ancient stirring from its forced slumber. The first dragon to emerge from the preservation pods was female, her scales a deep emerald that seemed to hold captured starlight. She rose from the biomechanical cradle with fluid grace, water streaming from her awakening form. When her eyes opened, they held the same profound sadness Sarah had seen in Thyros, but beneath it burned an unquenchable flame of defiance. "Lyrelai," Thyros spoke aloud for the first time, his voice a deep rumble that resonated through the chamber walls. "Sister of my choosing, guardian of the southern reaches. The final battle has come." Lyrelai's gaze fixed on Sarah with startling intensity. When the dragon spoke, her mental voice carried undertones of music that made Sarah's consciousness ring like a struck bell. "This small one awakened you? A human child managed what we could not achieve in a century of imprisonment." "She did more than awaken me," Thyros replied. "She chose to stand with us against the harvesters, knowing full well the dangers. Her people faced the same fate that befell ours." More pods were opening throughout the chamber. Dragons emerged in a variety of scale colors: deep blue, burnished gold, silver that reflected light like mirrors. Each one was massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall with wings that could span twice that when fully extended. But it was their eyes that marked them as something beyond simple beasts. Intelligence looked out from those ancient gazes, along with memories of a civilization that had touched the stars before humanity learned to make fire. The 16th dragon to awaken was clearly elderly even by their standards. His scales had turned white with age and intricate patterns of scars marked his hide like a map of ancient battles. When he looked at Sarah, she felt the weight of millennia pressing against her consciousness. "I am Valdris," the ancient dragon said, his mental voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "War leader of the dragon clans, keeper of the old ways. Human child, you have chosen to wake us from our preserved sleep. Do you understand what that decision will cost?" Sarah met his gaze steadily, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. "It will cost everything if we fail. But your people have already paid that price. At least this way we pay it fighting." Valdris studied her for a long moment, then turned to address the assembled dragons. The Heart of Storms requires 17 consciousness streams to achieve full activation. We are 17. The question before us is whether we use our remaining life force for one final strike against our captors, knowing that success will likely consume us entirely. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. These weren't just warriors preparing for battle. They were survivors planning their own sacrifice. The Heart of Storms would channel their very life essence into a weapon capable of destroying the Zephyrian fleet, but using it would kill the dragons who powered it. "Wait," Sarah said urgently. "There has to be another way. Your people have been prisoners for over a century. You deserve freedom, not a final battle that destroys you." Lyrelai approached Sarah with steps that seemed to make the chamber floor sing. "Little sister," she said gently, "we ceased to live when the harvesters took our homeworld. What you see here are not the living, but the preserved memories of who we once were. The heart offers us something more precious than continued existence. It offers us the chance to ensure our captors never harvest another species." The sound of Zephyrian weapons echoed through the facility's corridors, growing closer with each passing moment. The aliens had breached the facility's outer defenses and were systematically searching for the weapon chamber. Time was running out. Thyrus moved to the Heart of Storms and placed his clawed hands on its crystalline surface. The massive formation responded immediately, its internal lights shifting from gentle blue to brilliant white. "The weapon is accepting the initial consciousness link," he reported. "But we need all 17 streams active before the harvesters reach us." The other dragons took positions around the heart, each one placing their hands on different facets of the crystal structure. As they made contact, Sarah could feel their minds joining together in a harmony that transcended physical limitations. The chamber filled with a sound like singing crystal, growing more complex as each dragon added their voice to the chorus. But something was wrong. The heart's energy patterns remained unstable, fluctuating wildly as the dragon consciousnesses struggled to synchronize. Valdris looked troubled as he monitored the weapon's status through his neural link. "The preservation process damaged our neural pathways," he said grimly. "We cannot achieve the perfect harmony necessary for full activation. The weapon will fire, but at perhaps 60% efficiency, enough to damage the Zephyrian fleet, but not enough to destroy it completely." Sarah watched the crystalline formation pulse with chaotic energy, her mind racing through possibilities. The dragons were dying to power a weapon that might not even work properly. Their sacrifice would be in vain, and humanity would still face eventual harvest by the surviving Zephyrians. Then, she remembered something from her xenobiology training, the neurological similarities between human and dragon brain structures that had puzzled researchers for decades. Both species used remarkably similar bioelectric patterns for consciousness, despite evolving on different worlds. The resemblance had been dismissed as coincidence, but what if it was something more? What if you had an undamaged neural pattern to serve as a stabilizing influence? Sarah asked. Someone whose consciousness wasn't harmed by preservation technology? Valdris's ancient eyes widened with understanding. A human mind linked to the heart through dragon consciousness bridges. It could work, but the feedback would likely be fatal to your nervous system. You would die alongside us, child. Sarah looked around at the 17 dragons who had already sacrificed everything to give her people a chance. They stood ready to spend their remaining existence for the sake of strangers from another world. How could she do any less? Teach me how to link with the heart, she said quietly. Show me how to help you save both our peoples. The sound of Zephyrian weapons was directly outside the chamber now. In moments, the aliens would breach the final barrier and end humanity's last hope. Sarah stepped toward the Heart of Storms, knowing that her next decision would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The chamber's entrance exploded inward as Zephyrian soldiers breached the final barrier. Energy weapons discharged in brilliant flashes, their beams striking the stone walls and leaving smoking craters. But the dragons were already moving, their massive forms flowing around the Heart of Storms like water around a stone. Protect the human, Valdris roared, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. She is the key to our victory. 3 dragons launched themselves at the advancing Zephyrians with terrifying speed. Their claws, forged for combat against armored opponents, tore through alien energy shields like paper. Lyrely breathed a stream of superheated plasma that melted the invaders' weapons into useless slag. The aliens retreated in disorder, their melodic voices rising to panicked shrieks. But more Zephyrians were coming. Sarah could hear reinforcements moving through the facility's corridors, their energy weapons charging for another assault. The dragons couldn't hold them back indefinitely. Thyros guided Sarah to the heart of Storm's primary interface, a smooth, crystalline surface that pulsed with inner light. "Place your hands here," he said urgently. "Open your mind to the weapon's consciousness. Do not fight the connection. Let it flow through you like water through a riverbed." Sarah pressed her palms against the crystal surface and immediately gasped as alien sensations flooded her nervous system. The heart was alive in ways that human science couldn't explain. A fusion of biological consciousness and crystalline technology that had taken the dragons centuries to perfect. She felt her awareness expanding beyond the boundaries of her skull, touching the minds of the 17 dragons linked to the weapon. The sensation was overwhelming. Each dragon consciousness was vast and ancient, filled with memories spanning centuries of existence. Thyros's mind held the weight of scholarly knowledge accumulated over lifetimes of study. Clearalized thoughts sparkled with artistic creativity that had shaped entire landscapes. Valdris carried the strategic wisdom of a general who had commanded starfleets. But beneath their individual personalities, Sarah sensed something else, a shared grief so profound it threatened to drown her in sorrow. These beings had watched their entire civilization die, had spent over a century imprisoned while their captors used their homeworld as a hunting ground. The pain of that loss resonated through the neural link like a funeral dirge. "Focus on the harmony," Valdris said, his mental voice cutting through Sarah's emotional turmoil. "Individual pain must yield to collective purpose. We are one mind, one will, one weapon aimed at the heart of our enemy." Sarah struggled to maintain her concentration as the dragon consciousnesses synchronized around her human awareness. The heart of storms responded to their combined will, its energy output stabilizing for the first time in over a century. Through the facility's biomechanical sensors, she could feel the weapon's power building toward critical mass. Another wave of Zephyrian soldiers stormed into the chamber, this time led by an alien officer whose translucent skin showed complex neural implants beneath the surface. When it spoke, the words carried undertones of electronic interference that suggested direct machine augmentation. "Primitive creatures," it said, surveying the defending dragons with cold calculation. "You delay the inevitable. Your consciousness will be preserved regardless of your resistance. Surrender now and your suffering will be minimized." Valdris turned from the heart to face the Zephyrian commander, his white scales gleaming in the weapon's growing radiance. "We have already suffered all that your kind can inflict upon us. But you have never experienced true dragon fury. Let me correct that oversight." The ancient war leader launched himself at the Zephyrian commander with speed that belied his apparent age. His claws struck the alien's energy shield with such force that the protective barrier shattered like glass. The commander's enhanced reflexes saved it from immediate death. But Valdris's assault drove the entire Zephyrian force backward toward the chamber entrance. Through the heart's expanding consciousness, Sarah felt the weapon approaching full activation. The crystalline structure was drawing power from the planet's magnetic field, channeling geothermal energy through its biomechanical conduits. But the process was consuming the dragon's life force at an alarming rate. She could feel their consciousness streams beginning to fade as the weapon drained their vital essence. "How long do we have?" she asked through the neural link. "Perhaps 10 minutes until the heart reaches full charge," Thyros replied, his mental voice noticeably weaker than before. "But the Zephyrians will not wait for us to complete the process. They are already moving to destroy the facility, rather than risk losing their fleet." Sarah felt tremors running through the chamber walls as explosions echoed from somewhere above. The aliens were using heavy weapons against the facility's biomechanical infrastructure, trying to collapse the entire complex before the heart could fire. Chunks of organic matter rained from the ceiling as support structures failed under the bombardment. "The weapon must fire now," Valdris commanded from across the chamber where he battled 3 Zephyrian soldiers simultaneously. Even at partial charge, it can cripple their fleet enough to prevent the harvest. But Sarah could sense the heart's incomplete energy matrix through their shared link. A premature firing would dissipate harmlessly against the Zephyrian ship's defensive screens. They needed more time to reach critical mass, time they didn't have, unless someone was willing to pay the ultimate price for those precious minutes. Sarah made her choice with crystalline clarity. Instead of maintaining her stabilizing influence on the weapon's energy matrix, she began channeling her own life force into the heart's power systems. The sensation was like pouring her soul into a bottomless well, but the weapon's charge rate immediately increased. Sarah, no. Thyrus's mental voice carried anguish that echoed through all 17 dragon minds. You cannot sacrifice yourself for our cause. Your people need you to survive, to carry on where we cannot. But Sarah was already committed to the path she had chosen. Her consciousness was merging with the Heart of Storms, becoming part of its targeting systems and energy distribution networks. Through the weapon's sensors, she could see the Zephyrian fleet hanging in orbit above the planet, like metallic vultures. In moments, she would have the power to sweep them from the sky. I understand now, she said through the neural link, her human voice somehow carrying the harmony of 17 dragon minds. This isn't just about destroying their ships. It's about sending a message to every Zephyrian harvester in the galaxy that some species will never submit to being livestock. The Heart of Storms reached critical mass just as the chamber's ceiling began to collapse. Sarah felt the weapon's consciousness merge completely with her own, transforming her from a stabilizer into the heart's living trigger. Through sensors scattered across the planet's surface, she could see the Zephyrian fleet beginning to flee as their instruments detected the massive energy buildup. But they were too late. The Heart of Storms fired with the accumulated fury of a dead civilization and the desperate hope of humanity's future. The beam that erupted from the planet's core was visible from orbit, a column of pure energy that punched through atmosphere and void to strike the fleeing Zephyrian ships. The first vessel simply ceased to exist, its molecular structure unraveling under the weapon's assault. The second ship managed to raise its shields before the beam struck, but the Heart's power overwhelmed the alien defenses and turned the vessel into expanding plasma. One by one, the Harvester fleet was consumed by dragon vengeance made manifest. As the last Zephyrian ship died in silent fire, Sarah felt the dragon's consciousness streams beginning to fade. Their life force was spent, consumed by the weapon they had used to protect both their species and hers. But instead of sadness, she sensed profound satisfaction radiating through the neural link. It is finished, Valdris said, his ancient voice barely a whisper in her mind. The harvesters are destroyed, and word of their defeat will spread. Other species will know that the Zephyrians can be beaten. Sarah wanted to maintain the connection, to preserve these magnificent beings who had sacrificed everything for strangers from another world. But the Heart of Storms was powering down, its crystalline structure growing dark as the dragon's consciousness streams dissolved into peaceful silence. The chamber fell quiet, except for the sound of settling debris. Sarah found herself alone among the 17 empty preservation pods, her hands still pressed against the now dormant Heart of Storms. The weapon had fulfilled its purpose, but at a cost that would echo through her dreams for the rest of her life. Above ground, the first rescue ships were already arriving in response to her emergency broadcast. Humanity would survive, warned by her message and protected by dragon sacrifice. But the galaxy had lost something irreplaceable, the last remnants of a civilization that had chosen courage over survival, honor over existence. Sarah Chen, 19-year-old xenobiologist, walked toward the facility's exit, carrying the weight of two species' hopes. Behind her, the Heart of Storms stood silent in its chamber, a monument to the price of freedom and the fury of the innocent pushed too far. The rescue fleet that arrived at Kepler 442b 3 days later found a colony in chaos. Human survivors wandered through the settlement in a daze, their memories fragmented by Zephyrian stunning weapons. Dr. Webb and most of the administrative staff had no recollection of the final 24 hours before the attack, their minds apparently wiped clean by alien technology designed to eliminate witnesses. But Sarah Chen remembered everything. She stood in the colony's rebuilt communication center, watching as military investigators combed through the wreckage of the Zephyrian ships that had crashed across the planet's surface. The Heart of Storms had done its work thoroughly. Not a single alien vessel had escaped to carry word back to their homeworld. The Harvester threat to this system was over. Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Force studied Sarah's report with the expression of someone trying to process impossible information. The grizzled veteran had seen combat against hostile alien species before, but nothing in his experience compared to the tale of ancient dragons and planet-killing weapons that the young xenobiologist had documented. Dr. Chen, I want to make sure I understand your account correctly, Morrison said carefully. You're claiming that an extinct alien species helped humanity destroy a Zephyrian harvester fleet, using technology that predates human civilization by millennia? Sarah nodded, her eyes distant as she recalled the final moments in the Heart's Chamber. The dragons called it the last war, Admiral. They knew they wouldn't survive the weapon's activation, but they chose to make their final stand protecting another species from the same fate they had suffered. The Admiral's aide, a young intelligence officer named Lieutenant Torres, looked up from her data tablet with obvious skepticism. Ma'am, with respect, the physical evidence doesn't support claims of dragon involvement. The underground facility shows signs of advanced biotechnology, but nothing definitively points to a non-human origin. Sarah had expected this reaction. The dragons had been careful to ensure that their sacrifice wouldn't burden humanity with unwanted attention from other galactic powers. The Heart of Storms had self-destructed after firing, leaving only crystalline residue that could be explained as natural formation. The preservation pods had dissolved into organic compounds that resembled exotic bacteria. But some evidence remained for those who knew where to look. Admiral, I'd like to show you something, Sarah said, leading the military delegation toward the colony's outer perimeter. The crash site of the largest Zephyrian ship lay half a kilometer from the settlement, its twisted hull partially buried in the impact crater. The alien vessel was larger than anything in the human fleet, its organic-looking hull suggesting technology that blurred the line between engineering and biology. Salvage teams had been working for days to extract useful technology from the wreckage, but their efforts had yielded little beyond melted slag and incomprehensible alien machinery. Sarah guided them to a section of the ship's hull that bore distinctive markings, deep gouges that formed complex patterns across the metal surface. The dragons marked their victory, she explained, running her fingers along the scored lines. These symbols tell the story of their people's final battle. Lieutenant Torres examined the markings with her scanner, frowning at the readings. The metal shows signs of extreme heat exposure, but these patterns could have been caused by the crash impact or weapon discharge. Could have been, Sarah agreed. But they weren't. These are dragon script, Lieutenant, written in their ancient language by claws that turned Zephyrian hull plating into paper. Admiral Morrison studied the markings with growing interest. Can you read what they say? Sarah smiled sadly, remembering Thyrus's final gift. A download of linguistic knowledge that had flooded her mind in the moments before his consciousness faded. They say, "Here died the last free dragons defending the young hawks who reminded us why freedom is worth dying for." The delegation fell silent as the implications sank in. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Zephyrian home fleets would eventually notice that one of their harvester groups had disappeared. When they came looking for answers, they would find evidence of a weapon capable of destroying entire fleets, operated by humans who had somehow gained access to technology beyond their apparent development level. Dr. Chen, Morrison said quietly, what you're describing changes everything. If the Zephyrians have been operating harvester fleets throughout this sector, then dozens of species might be facing the same threat. But if we also have access to dragon weapons technology, we don't, Sarah interrupted firmly. The Heart of Storms was unique, built specifically for this planet's magnetic field configuration. It can't be replicated or moved. And even if it could, the cost of operating it is too high. 17 sapient beings died to fire at once. But the Admiral was already thinking like a strategist. Then we need to find other dragon ruins, other weapons. The technology you've described could shift the balance of power throughout known space. We could become the protectors instead of the protected. Sarah felt a chill of premonition at his words. She had seen what the pursuit of power had done to the Zephyrians, how their hunger for supremacy had transformed them from explorers into harvesters. The dragon's final sacrifice would mean nothing if humanity simply replaced one galactic tyrant with another. Admiral, with respect, you're missing the point, she said. The dragons didn't save us so we could become the new Zephyrians. They died to give us a chance to choose a better path. Torres looked up from her continued examination of the ship markings. Ma'am, I'm detecting residual energy signatures in these gouges that don't match any known weapons technology. Whatever made these marks was using some form of plasma manipulation that our physics models can't explain. The lieutenant's discovery sent ripples of excitement through the military delegation. Sarah watched their expressions shift from skepticism to calculation as they realized the implications. Dragon technology was real and potentially recoverable. The hunt for alien weapons would begin within hours of their return to Earth. Sarah turned away from the crash site and walked toward the colony's memorial garden, where the names of those lost in the Zephyrian attack had been carved into native stone. She had tried to add dragon names to the memorial, but the Colonial Council had voted against including unverified alien entities in the official record. So she had created her own memorial in the cavern where the Heart of Storms once stood. 17 crystalline markers, each one inscribed with a dragon name in their own script. It wasn't much, but it was a promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten by the one human who truly understood what they had given up. As the military delegation continued their investigation of the crash site, Sarah made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She would not let humanity repeat the Zephyrians' mistakes. If the search for dragon technology was inevitable, then she would guide it toward understanding rather than exploitation. The dragons had trusted her with their final secret, the location of their homeworld. Hidden in Thyros's last mental transmission, somewhere among the stars lay a planet filled with ruins and technology that could either elevate humanity to new heights or corrupt them beyond redemption. Sarah Chen, keeper of dragon secrets and guardian of their memory, looked up at the alien sky and began planning for a future where wisdom would triumph over power. The real test of humanity's worthiness was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Kepler 442b, and Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the research vessel Dragon's Memory, watching an alien star system grow larger through the viewport. The coordinates Thyros had shared in his final moments had led them across half the galaxy to this remote cluster, where ancient dragon civilization had once flourished among a dozen worlds. The crew around her represented the best of human xenoarchaeology and military science, but Sarah had insisted on strict protocols for their mission. No weapons that could be used against sapient beings, no extraction of technology without understanding its cultural significance. Most importantly, no claims of ownership over dragon heritage sites. Dr. Chen, we're detecting massive artificial structures on the 4th planet, reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the expedition's military liaison. The energy signatures match what we found in the underground facility, but on a planetary scale. Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the discovery. Thyros had prepared her for what they would find here, a civilization that had achieved perfect harmony between technology and biology, where entire worlds had been shaped into living artworks that spanned continents. The dragons hadn't just built cities, they had grown them. Remember our agreements, Commander, Sarah said firmly. We're here to learn and to document, not to claim or exploit. These sites are monuments to a lost people, not resources for human expansion. The years since Kepler 442b had not been kind to Sarah's idealistic vision. Admiral Morrison had indeed launched a search for dragon technology, despite her warnings about the costs of pursuing power over wisdom. 3 separate military expeditions had been sent to investigate rumored dragon ruins, each one returning with fragments of incomprehensible, alien devices and tales of automated defenses that killed anyone who approached with violent intent. The breakthrough had come when Sarah proposed a different approach. Instead of military expeditions seeking weapons, she had assembled a team of archaeologists, linguists, and cultural specialists dedicated to understanding dragon civilization rather than exploiting it. The dragon script she had learned from Thyros proved to be the key. The ancient language contained mathematical and philosophical concepts that unlocked dormant systems throughout the ruins. Approaching the 4th planet now, announced Dr. Reeves, the expedition's lead archaeologist. Sarah, you need to see this. The entire northern continent appears to be a single integrated structure. It's like they built a city the size of Australia. Through the viewport, Sarah could see what Reeves meant. The planet's land masses were covered in organic-looking formations that pulsed with subtle bioluminescence. Spires twisted toward the sky like crystalline trees, connected by flowing bridges that resembled frozen waterfalls. Everything was designed on a scale that made human architecture look like children's toys. But it was the silence that affected Sarah most deeply. No energy signatures suggested active technology. No communication signals indicated surviving inhabitants. The greatest civilization the galaxy had ever produced was now a museum of its own magnificence, preserved in crystalline metal, for visitors who might never truly understand its creator's vision. The landing site Sarah had chosen was significant, a vast plaza where 17 spires, arranged in a perfect circle, reached toward the stars. Thyros's memories had identified this as the Council of Voices, where representatives from every dragon world had gathered to make decisions affecting their entire species. It was here that the dragons had voted to resist Zephyrian expansion. Knowing that choice would likely lead to their extinction, Sarah's team deployed with the reverence appropriate for a sacred site. Their instruments detected no active defenses, but the plaza's crystalline formations responded to her presence with gentle illuminations that seemed to recognize her unique neural patterns. The dragon technology remembered her connection to the heart of storms. The central spire contains what appears to be a vast data repository, Dr. Martinez reported from her position near the plaza's heart. But it's not responding to conventional interfaces. The technology seems to require biological contact. Sarah approached the spire with growing anticipation. If the dragons had left records of their civilization, those archives might contain solutions to problems humanity hadn't yet learned to ask. The crystalline surface felt warm beneath her palm, and immediately her consciousness was flooded with images from across dragon history. She saw their species' early development, when they had learned to shape stone with controlled plasma breath and to fly between floating mountain peaks on wings that caught thermal currents. She witnessed their first ventures into space, when young dragons had ridden solar winds to neighboring worlds and established colonies among the stars. But more importantly, she saw their philosophy. The dragons had never conquered other species or claimed territory through force. Instead, they had spent millennia learning to live in harmony with the natural forces of the universe. Their technology wasn't built to dominate nature but to cooperate with it, creating tools that enhanced rather than replaced biological systems. "Sarah," Dr. Reeves called urgently from across the plaza. "You need to see this. We found something that doesn't match the rest of the architecture." Sarah reluctantly broke contact with the spire and followed Reeves to a section of the plaza where the elegant dragon craftsmanship gave way to something harsh and utilitarian. Metal structures erupted from the organic landscape like mechanical tumors, their surfaces bearing the telltale signs of Zephyrian construction. "They were here," Sarah said quietly, recognizing the harvester infrastructure from her studies of the underground facility. The Zephyrians built extraction equipment right in the heart of dragon civilization. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a battlefield where two species had fought for control of resources. This was a violation of everything the dragons had held sacred, a desecration of their most holy sites for the purpose of industrialized slaughter. Dr. Martinez's scanner beeped urgently as she examined the Zephyrian structures. "Sarah, these installations are still active. Minimal power levels, but definitely functional. It's like they're waiting for someone to restart the harvest process." A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she realized the truth. The Zephyrians hadn't just conquered dragon worlds. They had left infrastructure in place to harvest any species that might later evolve to sapience. The entire dragon star system was a trap, waiting to spring on whoever discovered it. But the dragons had been clever in their final preparations. As Sarah reconnected with the central spire, she felt their last gift downloading into her consciousness. Not just historical records, but active countermeasures designed to neutralize Zephyrian technology. The dragons had spent their final years preparing a surprise for anyone who might try to resume the harvest. "Everyone away from the Zephyrian structures," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying new authority. "The dragons left us something." Crystalline spires around the plaza began to resonate with harmonic frequencies that made the air itself sing. Light poured from their surfaces in patterns that hurt human eyes to observe directly. The Zephyrian installations responded with alarms and defensive measures, but their technology was centuries out of date compared to the dragon countermeasures. One by one, the harvester machines collapsed as their molecular structures were disrupted by carefully tuned energy fields. The metal structures dissolved into component atoms that were absorbed by the plaza's organic systems and transformed into new crystalline growths. Within minutes, no trace remained of Zephyrian presence among the dragon monuments. Sarah felt Thyros's presence one final time as the cleansing process completed. Not a ghost or preserved consciousness, but an echo of wisdom embedded in the technology itself. The dragons had foreseen this moment and had prepared their final gift for the species they had died to protect. "Dr. Chen," Commander Hayes said with obvious awe. "What just happened?" Sarah smiled as she felt the weight of dragon knowledge settling into her mind. "The dragons kept their promise, Commander. They've given us the tools to make sure the harvest never happens again, but more than that, they've shown us a different way to reach for the stars." As the dragon's memory prepared to return to human space, Sarah began composing her report for the Colonial Authority. Humanity had found something more valuable than weapons in the dragon ruins. They had discovered a philosophy of growth that didn't require conquest, of strength that didn't demand submission from others. The Zephyrians would return eventually, drawn by the disappearance of their harvester fleets. When they came, they would find humanity armed not just with superior technology, but with the wisdom to use it responsibly. The dragon's sacrifice had planted seeds that would grow into a better future for all sapient species. Sarah Chen, keeper of dragon wisdom and architect of humanity's new path, looked out at the stars and saw infinite possibilities spreading before them. The age of harvesters was ending. The time of guardians was about to begin,